Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogram with Keri Smith. Today we're going to be talking about the Twitter files. We've already covered the first Twitter files dump on this channel. We're going to be reading through at least the second one today from Bari Weiss. There have been 4 of them, and unless I'm behind, there have been 4. We're going to cover the second one, maybe a little bit of the third. If you are a returning guest, thanks for being here. Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas month. I have a different background, you may have noticed, because my husband and I are renovating this old house, and we finally, the past couple weeks, more than a couple weeks, like 3 or 4 weeks, have been just constant renovation in the music parlor. We were getting ready for our first live concert that we hosted this past Friday night. It was amazing. He had an opera singer. He did classical piano. We live streamed the first half of it, the part with the opera singer. And the room came together. I had to take a bunch of the art that I was using back here to hide the ripped wallpaper because we haven't renovated this room yet. So we took a bunch of that art and put it in the music parlor. So today Robert Lowry, who is a deprogrammed audience member, he came to the concert. He's still here in Texas, and he helped me today with some lighting and to hang this beautiful quilt that a lot of the wrong knitters that you guys made. And yeah, she hung the blankie. I did. So this is it's a dual purpose. It covers up the terrible peeled wallpaper until we can renovate this room, and also we can put all of your work on display. This quilt, I did a post about it, but if you haven't seen it, this is the nicest gift that anyone has ever given me my whole life. It's a lot of the wrong knitters came together and did this as a surprise for me and my husband, and it's 42 squares. I believe 40 different people knit squares from like 5 different countries and put this whole quilt together. And it's just, I can look at it now without getting emotional. I used to not be able to look at it without getting emotional because it's so much work. It's hard to fathom, so much work and so many people. So eventually we're going to either put it on the bed when we get the bedroom done, or I'm going to get it framed and maybe make it the permanent backdrop. I'm not sure. It's just so beautiful. Anyway, that's the background. That's what's behind me. One quick announcement before I bring in my co-host today. I love you too, Amy. Thank you. We did, like I said, we live streamed the first half of our first house concert, and you can watch that here on this channel. Robert, who was here, filmed the whole thing, and so we're going to be releasing it. Probably in parts. We're going to release it on my husband's channel. That's Anthony Garcia Music here on YouTube. And we plan to do more of these concerts. There were several people from online and from Deprogrammed who came. People drove from other states to come. And I mean, that's amazing. And it was just a wonderful mix of people. We had about 50 people here, filled our house, and it was just so lovely. Like I don't know, like this just really joyful feeling. And now, not just because it's the Christmas month, everyone just brought this energy with them. And somebody made me 2 buttermilk pies because I had mentioned I'd never had buttermilk pies. People brought different treats. Jill brought bacon wrapped dates, which were delicious. And I don't even like bacon. It was awesome. Anyway, long story short, we're going to do more of these, and my husband has different types of music planned. And so it's sort of that old salon style evening where it's this intimate performance in somebody's home, and good conversation and music and art. And so we're going to be doing, I know he's got a Latin music night planned. He's planning something with a musician friend of his from Germany who's going to be visiting. And so we're already working on the next one. We'll let you guys know. And we're going to keep these small. We learned a lot this time, so we know what to do better for next time in terms of fitting everyone in. And we'll let you know about it. If you're interested in being on the list when we let people know about it, you can email us at deprogrammedpod. That's deprogrammedpod, POD, @gmail.com. And We hope to see some of you there in our home. Okay, that's it. Okay, today's guest is a returning guest, a friend of the show. His name is Jason Littlefield. He's also a Texan. I'm very happy to have him on today. Please welcome Jason, guys.
Howdy, howdy. It's wonderful to see you and the great state of Texas behind you. And also, I make a pretty mean buttermilk pie, just
You
so you
do?
know. Mm-hmm.
I had never had one. And I don't know why, because it's probably my second favorite pie after sweet potato. It's delicious. It's sort of like custard,
Yes.
and just cinnamon, and the spice in it is really good, and it's fluffy. It's hard to describe it. If you haven't had one, I can definitely recommend it now. It's so wonderful. So I didn't. Do you cook a lot?
Um, Sometimes, whenever there's people to cook for, I don't just cook for, that's too much work for myself.
Just for
Um,
you, yeah.
yeah. But I
Part of
do, that's a way that I show love and care is by preparing food for people that I love and care about.
Is it one of your love languages? Food? It would go fall under
Pizza,
acts
pizza
of service.
I think pizza is my top love language.
Pizza. Okay. To give and to receive pizza.
Yes.
Um, okay. I brought you here. We're gonna talk about the Twitter files, which I everybody should be talking about. Every channel, everyone in that but unfortunately the media is not really covering it, and that's that's also not surprising, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about the Twitter files, but before we do, Jason, can you, if there's anyone new here who's not familiar with you, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I spent, I would say, 21 years in public education, and you had me on a couple of years ago where I started talking about what's happening with social and emotional learning and all of that big hubbub. I'm also the executive director of a nonprofit organization called Empowered Pathways, and I am a co-founder of Free Black Thought. And my overall purpose and mission right now is to try to find and unite, I'll say 85 to 86% of all human beings in the name of liberty, because I'm seeing the political debate right now as liberty versus tyranny.
Mhm.
And, I'm also the host of a podcast called Reformation Radio. You can find that wherever podcasts are available. And I started that not just to add another noise, another voice of noise in the space, but to have a series of conversations that people can share with others, hopefully to explain what is happening in this present moment and what are some things that we can do.
Mhm. You are a very action-focused person.
Yes. In fact, the I just uploaded an episode, and the title of it is liberty even worth fighting for? Because I'm noticing an overall lack of action from
Mhm.
quote unquote our side. So I'm also really hoping to rally the troops, get people energized and engaged, fighting for something. Because the only social movements that have ever been successful in human history are because they are fighting for something, not just fighting against.
I think you're exactly right, and I think you're a good voice to be a leader in terms of rallying people to fight for something, because you strike me as um like a very authentic person, and not a person who craves who's doing this for the wrong reasons, who craves um the darker side of things. You're the reluctant leader that we all need.
Thank you. Yeah, I was honestly a few years ago, I was just minding my own business, living, doing the thing of life. And I started noticing these ideas coming into my workplace and speaking out against those ideas. And really, I started noticing them around 2011.
Hmm.
And I imagined what the future was going to look like. So in 2012, I fled the country. My initial response was, I don't want to be around when this happens, when it's so obvious to everybody else. I want to take my children out of this place. So my original plan was to be chilling in West Africa right now while all this was going
Mhm.
on, minding my own business. But I am back in the United States and I'm fighting for the cause of liberty. And I'm honored to do so.
Well, I want to talk to you more. We haven't set a date yet, but I'm going to come on Reformation Radio. I want to talk to you about action and fighting for something. And yeah, I'm excited to hear more about what you're planning, and maybe we can do something together, like we've talked about. And yeah, thank you for being here today.
For sure. Thank you for asking me.
Okay, somebody in the chat, I'm just gonna put up a couple of these. Oh, actually, thank you. Two Sisters and Some Yarn has thrown, she's thrown this up here. This is where you can follow Jason on Twitter, Jason the Human, THEE Human, and empoweredpathways.org. You can also find him on Reformation Radio and on freeblackthought.com. So that's
Thank you
where
for
people,
that.
yeah, that's where people can find you. Okay. I'm going to pull this up. Somebody in the chat said, while we were talking, Bari Weiss has just released part 5 of the Twitter files. We're going to back up because I don't do a daily show. And there have been so many of these released. I haven't covered part 2 yet. We're going to cover part 2. And let's see if you guys can see this. This is the kind of thing that I think, by the way, that I think all of my lefty friends who are still in the social justice world should be reading. And unfortunately, the mainstream media is kind of doing a good job of trying to ignore it. And so it's mostly people on Twitter and podcasters who are sharing it and talking about it. But this is huge. People were saying when we covered part 1, this is bigger than Watergate. I mean, this is kind of crazy what they've been doing. And in part 1 was journalist Matt Taibbi who released part 1. We covered that in a previous episode. And the gist of that one was that basically they were doing everything they could to censor primarily people who were not of a left viewpoint, and high profile people as well as people with very minimal following. And they were trying to internally at Twitter come up with reasons to justify, sort of working backwards, reasons to justify censoring and banning people, including the president. And when there were politicians, there was one Democratic politician who even wrote, who even like brought up the free speech issue and how they were concerned about what this meant for speech, and it's specifically in regards to Twitter censoring and removing the Hunter Biden laptop story right before the election. And internally at Twitter, they didn't seem to really even understand what was meant by that it was a speech issue. They were sort of saying, well, we can justify it with this policy and this policy. And it's like, that's not the point. It's against the principles of free speech, which sort of was lost on them. Is there anything you would add about part 1?
Just to maybe reframe the whole situation in a little bit different perspective that I haven't heard,
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's still this perception of there's the traditional left versus the traditional right, or the Republicans versus the Democrats,
Mm-hmm.
which that puts us in a position to where half of the country is always defending a crackdown on individual rights, wars, big corporations and big pharma. So with that 50-50 tribal allegiance, there's half of the country right now that is burying their head in the sand and making excuses for this clear tyrannical fascism that's taking place. And I use that word fascism as the definition of what that means. You know, when I was first on your show, I mentioned that what happens in the culture is a precursor to the political.
Yes.
And if we don't stop this cultural tyranny, the political is right behind it. Little did we know that it was already taking place, because this was a little bit after what Twitter was doing to suppress speech, suppress people, and actually working with government agencies on who to stifle.
Yeah.
So I would like for us, as we the people, to think about this is a tyrannical political force that is working to erode not just our individual liberty, but the individual liberty of all future human beings. So maybe we can all take this a bit more seriously than just, oh, it's this team that's doing this thing, and it's okay now.
Yes, that's one of the biggest problems with the right left tribalism that you talk about is so many people, whether they would call themselves right or left, fall into that trap of I think saying, well, it's okay because it's my team doing it and I'm going to ignore it, and not being able to see down the road. It's so myopic, it's so short-sighted, because down the road, if if you allow this to happen, it could easily be used against you. I mean, that's just one reason. I also think it's unethical and unprincipled to say to say when it's my team doing it, it's okay. Um,
Right.
but aside, if you don't care about principles and you don't care about being intellectually consistent, you don't care about ethics, at the very least, pragmatically, you should admit that if you allow something like this to happen without consequences, then it could easily be turned against your team down the road. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And we have enough recent history to show that.
Yes.
To show that there's really no difference in Republicans and Democrats over the past 30 years. And I developed that attitude and mindset as a 17-year-old 30 years ago. So I've been watching these
Wow.
last 30 years of people defending the right when the right's doing wrong, people defending the left when the left's doing wrong, when essentially the the big political debate of the modern day world is national sovereignty versus globalization. And not just national sovereignty, but also personal sovereignty.
Yeah. Individual sovereignty. Well, you figured this out very early if you were 17. It took me until my 40s. So, better
Well,
late than never.
better late than never. Yeah, yeah, of course.
uh, Two sisters and some yarn modding today. One of the mods in chat today says, "Smash that like button, y'all, or no pie for you." That's great. That should be our catchphrase. No pie for you. Thank you, lady. Okay, we're gonna start reading through Twitter files, part two, for anybody who prefers to listen to this kind of stuff rather than going on Twitter and reading it. This is from Bari Weiss. Journalist Bari Weiss is the one who did part two. There's different journalists who've been covering this. So here we go. This is on screen. Thread, the Twitter files part two, Twitter's secret blacklists. Now, this one concerns shadow banning and other things they did to throttle and censor accounts that they didn't like, which for the most part were accounts that were not on the left. And this is something they consistently denied. They've always denied they were doing this. And of course, those of us who are not on the left, it's very obvious they've been doing this. But I think when I talk to normies or leftists out in the real world, like offline, they sometimes have no idea. When I talk about censorship online, they're like, "What are you talking about?" Like, they have no idea. It's like they live in a different world. So, if you're a friend on the left who's watching this, we're gonna read through some of this, and some of it might be surprising to you. Okay, Twitter's secret blacklist. A new Twitter Files investigation reveals that teams of Twitter employees build blacklists, prevent disfavored tweets from trending, and actively limit the visibility of entire accounts or even trending topics, all in secret without informing users. Those of you on the left who kept talking about after Trump was elected, like, oh, it's time to go out and buy George Orwell's 1984. We need to buy 1984. I would encourage you to actually read those copies that you bought, because this is 1984. It's I know you're going to say, "Oh, but it's a corporation doing it, not the government." They're doing it in coordination with the government and with the Democratic Party, and in some cases, as we saw in the Twitter files, with the FBI. So even if the government weren't involved, this is still authoritarian, censorious tactics. This is the 1984 stuff. This is Big Brother deciding that you don't have a right to see certain things or hear certain points of view, and that they're going to ban people and limit their reach and not tell them. Worse than banning them, they're going to let them think that they're still, tweeting to an audience of people, and they're going to shadow ban their tweets so it's not reaching that many people. And they did this to doctors, they did this to scientists, as we're going to see. So, okay. If you want to jump in at any point, just tell me to pause it, Jason.
Okay.
Twitter once had a mission, quote, to give everyone the power to create and share ideas and information instantly without barriers, end quote. Along the way, barriers nevertheless were erected. Take, for example, Stanford's Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who argued that COVID lockdowns would harm children, which, side note, I'll just say they did. We know they did. Go and look at the statistics on childhood, the depression rates of depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation in children and teenagers, all increased during the lockdowns. Look at the developmental delays. And I've spoken to teachers, even this week, I spoke to a teacher this weekend who said children are not speaking at the same level they used to. They're not learning they're not learning language at the same level. And the CDC pushed back the milestones for early childhood development without saying it was because of the lockdowns and masking, but they just quietly pushed it back and said, well, the date at which a child should be able to know 50 words, we're going to push it back 6 months to a year. We're going to push all this back. And why did that happen? What happened in the past couple of years? Children learn how to speak by being social, being around other people, and by watching adults' lips, watching when they talk. If you look at a baby, when you're talking, they're not looking at your eyes, they're looking at your mouth. Sorry for the long side note, but
No,
okay.
that's and maybe it's worth mentioning that Mao closed the schools during the Cultural Revolution. The
Wow. I did.
schools were closed down, and when you look at the overall philosophical heart of the movement, it is an anti-individual movement. It is a
Mhm.
movement that is designed to break the individual. So it there was a massive movement to do that to children. And there were people speaking out, and everybody that spoke out like, hey, we should be thinking about this, they were deemed a bad person. And even now in schools, I remember the term learning loss was
Yes.
brought up, and there is even a movement or an urge not to talk about or address learning loss because that's somehow white supremacy in nature, and we just need to
They'll say
do.
anything not to let us look at this.
Yeah.
This is not, again, just to hit home what you were saying earlier, Jason, for anyone who's watching who considers themselves part of the left or what have you, this is not a left or right thing. This should
Mm-mm.
be infuriating to all of us. They use the left and right thing to keep you guys from talking about and noticing certain things, and to keep people on the right from talking about and noticing certain things. They use that whole made up divide to keep people from uniting and saying, this is wrong. Like, look what
Yes.
happened to kids the past 2 years.
Yes. And to just compound that, we did have half of the country, 20 years ago supporting wars and supporting the Patriot Act, in the name of patriotism. So there is a history of the right supporting things that turned out to be detrimental to us all.
Oh yeah. They did the same thing. I completely agree, because I've been on, anybody who's a longtime viewer of the show knows I was in the social justice left for 20 years, most of my adult life. Consider myself a leftist. Actually, I thought I was just like a liberal and a progressive. I didn't realize what was happening to the left at the time. It took me a while to wake up. But, during the Iraq war, the build up to that, all the lies, the media pushing it, it was the Patriot Act, all of that stuff. They got a lot of people on the right to support that stuff, just like they got a lot of people on the left this time to support authoritarian lockdowns, mask mandates, and all this stuff that hurt kids.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. Let me get back to her tweet. Number 3 of the Twitter files. Take, for example, Stanford's Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who argued that COVID lockdowns would harm children. Twitter secretly placed him on a, quote, trends blacklist, end quote, which prevented his tweets from trending. And you can see here, this is on the back end. This is secret. They don't tell you they're doing this to your account. But you can see they have put him under a trends blacklist, and they say he has a recent abuse strike. Okay. Or consider the popular right-wing talk show host Dan Bongino, who at one point was slapped with a, quote, search blacklist, end quote. And you can see that there. They've got search blacklist listed. They say he's Twitter Blue verified. He's got multiple accounts, a notification spike. Not sure what that means, but they have him on a search blacklist. And people again, if you're on the left and this is news to you, those of us who are not leftists, and I don't mean people just on the right, because I know some of you still thinking that way, like right, left. I just mean people who did not fall in line with the narrative, and that ranges from actual liberals to conservatives to libertarians to people who don't identify in any way. Anybody who is not part of this leftist narrative of the past 2 years, though, there were several people who knew that they were on a search blacklist. You know why? Because if you went to Twitter and typed their name in, even if you were following them, you couldn't find them. Like, they made it so you couldn't find certain accounts. I'm sorry, I sound like I'm sighing and I'm tired. It's just like, you guys, this has been happening. We just have the evidence of it now.
Right.
Okay. Twitter set the account of conservative activist Charlie Kirk to, quote, do not amplify. You can see that here on his account. They have that listed, do not amplify. Twitter denied, this is the real kicker, Twitter denied that it does such things. In 2018, Twitter's how do you say her name?
Ooh, you're asking the wrong person.
Yeah, Vijaya Gotti, then head of legal policy and trust, and Kavyan Bekpour, head of product, said, quote, we do not shadow ban, end quote. They added, quote, and we certainly don't shadow ban based on political viewpoints or ideology, end quote. Lying. Absolutely lying to people's faces. What many people call, quote, shadow banning, Twitter executives and employees call, quote, visibility filtering, or VF. Multiple high-level sources confirmed its meaning. Quote, think about visibility filtering as being a way for us to suppress what people see to different levels. It's a very powerful tool, end quote, one senior Twitter employee told us. VF, or visibility filtering, or aka shadow banning, refers to Twitter's control over user visibility. It used VF to block searches of individual users, to limit the scope of a particular tweet's discoverability, to block select users' posts from ever appearing on the trending page, and from inclusion in hashtag searches, all without users' knowledge. In secret. They did all of this in secret. And they denied it. They did it in secret and they lied about it. When people said, hey, we can tell you're doing this, they lied and said, we're not doing it. Quote, we control visibility quite a bit, and we control the amplification of your content quite a bit. And normal people do not know how much we do, end quote, one Twitter engineer told us. 2 additional Twitter employees confirmed this. The group that decided whether to limit the reach of certain users was the Strategic Response Team, Global Escalation Team, or it was acronym SRTGET, CERTGET. It often handled up to 200, quote, cases a day.
Wow.
They have all these, this again, this is a feature that people will recognize from George Orwell's 1984, and they'll recognize from history is all of these acronyms and these Orwellian names where they do the opposite of what it is they say they're doing. Like when Biden just tried to do this disinformation board, disinformation governance board or what have you. Like they name it the exact opposite of what they're doing, and then they pull together all of these administrators, admins. They create all these jobs where these admins are given all of this power to determine what you get to hear.
Yes. And I think the strongest example of that is calling liberty minded people, such as myself, fascist.
Yes.
Like that fascist finger got pointed at me when I'm trying to get everybody free.
Yeah.
And that's an idea that's believed by so many. It's not just one or two. It's not a fringe belief, but it was a mainstream belief that liberty-minded people are fascists.
Yes. They've tried to strip the meaning from words. Oh, Dion. Dion always has the best quotes at the right time. Dion says, it's a George Orwell quote. The word fascism is now no meaning except insofar as it signifies something not desirable. Yeah, they try and strip meaning from words. They use words improperly, and they use them. They engage in, when it's an individual doing it, what is known as DARVO, deny and reverse victim offender. So they, like a narcissist or a psychopath, they will accuse you of the very thing they're doing. Like
Mm.
every accusation from a narcissist is a confession of what they're doing. And it's sort of similar in the way that these psychopathic ideologies work, and I include social justice into that. It's not liberalism, it's illiberal. Words mean something. It is illiberal to censor speech, to do this kind of secret in the dark, to give all this power to a corporation, um, and to censor people and suppress what the public gets to hear. These unelected officials doing this, that's illiberal. And so when I say it's illiberal because words mean something. And so social justice, it's like an individual psychopath or narcissist, but it's an ideology. It's a psychopathic ideology. And it does this backwards, this Darvo thing all the time, where they call someone like you, Jason, who's liberty minded and for free speech and, the marketplace of ideas where people get to debate ideas, and good ideas rise to the top and bad ideas don't get supported. They call you a fascist. They've called me names like that before. And it's like that, you're stripping that word of all meaning, and you're doing it in defense of actual fascism and authoritarianism.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm a bit on a ranty mode today. You just
No, I think
jump
it's
in.
needed. I think it's needed. I think it's needed.
If at any point you want to, like, you're my co-host today, so you just jump in and tell me, let me get something in here.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I'll do it when needed for sure.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's continue. But there existed a level beyond official ticketing, beyond the rank and file moderators following the company's policy on paper. That is the quote, site integrity policy, policy escalation support, known as SIPES.
Known as what?
SIPES.
Is.
I think, like, I love the fact that all these have like 6 letters. These acronyms just keep getting longer.
It's like sip piss, which is essentially what they're asking all of us to do.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm
SIPES.
a little crass. Sorry, lunch crowd.
Sorry, lunchers. This secret group included head of legal policy and trust, Vijaya Gadi, the global head of trust and safety, Yoel Roth, subsequent CEOs Jack Dorsey and Parag Agrawal, and others. This is where the biggest, most politically sensitive decisions got made. Quote, think high follower account controversial, end quote, another Twitter employee told us. For these, quote, there would be no ticket or anything, quote. So they didn't want a record of these high follower account controversial figures of the censorship they were doing. So here she continues. This is Bari Weiss, if you're just listening. She says, one of the accounts that rose to this level of scrutiny was Libs of TikTok. an account that was on the Trends blacklist and was designated as, quote, do not take action on user without consulting with SIPPIS. Look at this. You can see that up at the top.
Wow.
Look at all these alerts they put on her Trends blacklist, so her tweets couldn't trend.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Just before we continue, so which side is being censored? If we look at the dichotomy as I see it, as globalism versus sovereignty,
Mm-hmm.
which two of those sides is being censored here?
Individualism, individual sovereignty, freedom.
So liberty, the quote unquote side of liberty is what is being censored. So that right there alarm bells should be going off for all of us.
Yes. No matter, again, if you're still locked into that right left thing and you consider yourself on the left, Jason's right. This is not a right left thing. This is a
Yeah, that's got to go, man.
yeah.
That's got to go now. In fact, I was pretty hell bent on getting rid of that in 2020 so that we could begin moving forward in a different direction, but that still hadn't happened. So now I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive and vocal about we got to cut all that out
Yeah.
now. And as you're reading through this, I hope people that will be in their mind now.
I hope so. I'm committed to I know that there are people who to some degree still buy into the right left thing who consider themselves on the left who watch Deprogrammed. Even this weekend I learned of a couple of other people who do and who are, how would I phrase this? One of whom is becoming more open-minded, in my opinion. And so I've decided I want to keep talking to them. Like I want to always
Yes.
imagine if you're someone who says like I'm on the left and you know you guys are on the right, Deprogrammed's on the right or whatever. Like if that's what you view this show as, and first of all, it's not. But if that's how you view it, that's okay. You're welcome here. And I want to remember that you're watching because I want to try and help make the case like Jason is doing that this is not a right left thing. And that prison that they've got you in of thinking everything is like about what's right or left, like that's keeping you from seeing what's happening, in my opinion. It used to keep me from seeing what was happening.
Divide and conquer is a very old military strategy, and it's been in place for a really long time here. But
Yeah.
we get to break free from that. We get to do something different, and that's the exciting part.
Yes. Two Sisters and Some Yarn has a great quote. She says, when the government's boot is on your throat, it matters not if it's the left or right boot. And same thing with these corporations that are censoring. It doesn't matter which boot it is. The boot's on your throat. They're deciding what information you get to view. You don't even get to make up your own mind with all of the information in front of you. They're deciding like this is all that the public gets access to. We're gonna censor news stories with documented sources. We're gonna decide, what's good for you, to know. And so you're, to whatever extent you are making up your own mind, you're doing it with limited information. First of all, it's so condescending. Okay. So this is Bari Weiss talking about Libs of TikTok and how it was on this special list where they were saying they have this little thing on here that says you cannot take any action on this account without consulting with SIPPES, which is a special governing board they had at Twitter, which handled the censorship of these high profile accounts, so that there weren't tickets created because they wanted to do this off record. The account, which Chaya Raichik began in November 2020 and now boasts over 1.4 million followers. By the way, look, can we just talk for a second about how all these accounts they really tried to suppress? Imagine how big they would be without that suppression. But that being said, 1.4 million is amazing. They were still able. This is how thirsty people are for the truth, is that they're even with all of these, everything stacked against them and all of this censorship that people on the so-called left were not subjected to, They were still building followers like this. Libs of TikTok still amassed 1.4 million followers,
Yes.
even with all of that interference. Okay, so the account, which Tyre Redchick began in November 2020 and now boasts over 1.4 million followers, was subjected to 6 suspensions in 2022 alone, Redchick says. Each time, Redchick was blocked from posting for as long as a week. Twitter repeatedly informed Redchick that she had been suspended for violating Twitter's policy against, quote, hateful conduct, end quote. But in an internal SIP-PIS memo from October 2022, after her 7th suspension, the committee acknowledged that Libs of TikTok has not directly engaged in behavior violating the hateful conduct policy. They said this.
Wow.
End quote. See here. And then you can see. We're just going to look through this. Site policy recommendation. Site policy recommends placing Libs of TikTok in a 7-day timeout at the account level, meaning not for a specific tweet, but the whole account, 7-day timeout, based on the account's continued pattern of indirectly violating Twitter's hateful conduct policy by tweeting content that either leads to or intends to incite harassment against individuals and institutions that support LGBTQ communities. At this time, site policy has not found explicitly violative tweets. Okay, so you guys hear that? This is what this account is doing, but we don't have any evidence of it because she hasn't actually done this. At
That's
this time,
tyranny.
that's tyranny. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just pointing that out, that is what that is.
It's crazy. Has not found any violative tweets, which would result in a permanent suspension of the account. This type of enforcement action, repeated 7-day timeouts at the account level, will not lead to permanent suspension. However, should Libs of TikTok engage in any other direct tweet level violations, we will move forward with permanent suspension. Meaning, she hasn't done anything that would allow us to permanently suspend her. We're just going to keep hitting her with these 7-day bans and hope she does something that we can say, there, now permanent suspension. Okay. I hear an echo. Do you guys hear that? Jason?
I do not.
You do not? Do you guys in the chat? Amy, do you hear that echo? It just started. That's so weird. Wasn't there before? No. Okay. Then never mind. The committee justified her suspensions internally by claiming that her posts encouraged online harassment of, quote, hospitals and medical providers, end quote, by insinuating that, quote, gender-affirming healthcare is equivalent to child abuse or grooming, end quote. By the way, you're allowed, it's a free country, you're allowed to say that so-called gender-affirming healthcare, that's more Orwellian language.
Yes.
You're talking about double mastectomies on children. You're talking about hormones that sterilize children.
Yes.
Okay. So gender affirming healthcare, you're allowed to say that in your opinion, that's the equivalent to child abuse. In my opinion, it's equivalent to child abuse. You're allowed to say that.
In my opinion, it is as well. And it's also adult abuse for whenever those children become adults and they're not happy with the decision that they made. Or that they were talked into by a quote unquote trusting adult.
Yes. We're already seeing that. There are more and more of these poor kids who are young adults now who are coming out every day and detransitioning and regretting what the adults in their life, the parents and the medical establishment, the doctors allowed them to choose to consent to when they weren't old enough to consent. I've seen so many of these tearful videos now. Most recently, this one girl, I hope to be able to interview her, but she was crying. She was like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to have kids now.
Yeah.
And I took my breasts off. Like,
yeah.
What do you say about that? She was like, they promised me that this was a cure, that I wouldn't have the depression and suicidal thoughts anymore. And it made it worse. Like, What do you do? What are they doing to children? Like, we're allowed to say, hey, we think this is messed up. It's like saying, like, oh, we need to suppress Keri because she said foot binding is in her opinion, that's abuse. Yeah, I think it is abuse. Foot
Yep.
binding kids. Yeah.
Yep. So think about all the suppression about that topic that was happening
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. That if that wouldn't have happened, there might be people out there that were not coaxed into going through with that.
Yeah.
So this is a really, really big deal.
This is a huge deal. All of this, every single one of these Twitter files dumps should be, if we lived in a non-tyrannical, if we lived in a just world with real journalists, this would be on every channel. Like, this is a huge story, not the crap that they're covering. I just want to highlight this because he's taken off. Robert Lowry, $5 super chat, sir. After everything you did this weekend, thank you. Thanks for supporting the show, and thanks for supporting the show with your labor. He helped me hang this quilt behind me today, and it helped with the lighting because I've had a lot of problems with it. Helped me figure it out, and did some recording of our house concert. Anyway, thank you, Robert. He says video and lighting look great. Taking off now. See you next time, Keri. There's a slight echo. Bye. Okay, I think the echo is gone now. Thank you, Robert. He's awesome. Okay. Yeah, Dion says that's truly the most disgusting part. The press is supposed to check on this, not be the cheerleader of this crap that they're doing to all of us.
Yeah, so as we are ditching those previous known ideas of right versus left, we can also now officially throw out that the media is a trustworthy source because
You mean get rid of that?
Of the lack of covering of this, and not to mention all of the other things. But yeah, we're gonna throw that away as well. We're gonna throw away trust and worthiness of the media.
Completely. And if you're on the left and if you've forgotten, like I forgot, we did not trust the media at all during the ramp up to the Iraq war, and for good reason. They were lying to us, and they were lying to us. I remember CNN lying to us about yellow cake.
Yep.
Remember that? Remember when we used to be skeptical of the media, the corporate media? Remember when we used to be skeptical of big pharma?
Yep.
They're
That's back when
manipulating us.
people referred to me as a lefty.
Yeah, me too.
And now they refer to me as a righty, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I hadn't changed.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I love having you on the show. We should do
I
this
love
more
being here.
often.
Yeah, for sure.
I kind of like the direction it's taking. Okay. We're going to continue with Twitter Files Part 2. This one from Bari Weiss. She's talking about Libs of TikTok and all the secret internal suppression and censorship that they were leveling against her and the constant temporary suspensions they were doing, even though Twitter admitted they couldn't find any tweets that violated their policy, but they said, but she violated our policy, but we can't find any tweets to prove that.
Yeah.
Okay. Compare this to what happened when Rachik herself was doxxed, meaning somebody released her private information about where she lived, etc., and her name. When she was doxxed on November 21st, 2022, a photo of her home with her address was posted in a tweet that has garnered more than 10,000 likes. When Rachik told Twitter that her address had been disseminated, she says that Twitter support responded with this message, quote, "We reviewed the reported content and didn't find it to be in violation of the Twitter rules," end quote. No action was taken. The doxing tweet is still up as of when Bari put this out on December 8th, on Thursday. In internal Slack messages, Twitter employees spoke of using technicalities to restrict the visibility of tweets and subjects. Here's Joel Roth, Twitter's then global head of trust and safety. Orwellian terms, guys.
I was fixing to say that is an Orwellian title if I've ever heard one.
Global head of trust and safety, Ministry of Truth, right? He said in a direct message to a colleague in early 2021, a lot of times SI has used technicality spam enforcements as a way to solve a problem created by safety under enforcing their policies, which again isn't a problem per se, but it keeps us from addressing the root cause of the issue, which is that our safety policies need some attention. Meaning, we're using technicalities to get rid of people, but what we really want to do is go in there and tighten up our safety policies even more to
Yeah.
justify doing this. 6 days later, in a direct message with an employee on the health, misinformation, privacy, and identity research team.
My
The names of these things are amazing. Roth requested more research to support expanding, quote, non-removal policy interventions like disabling engagements and de-amplification and visibility filtering. And you can read, we're not going to read that whole thing, but that's what he's asking for. Roth wrote, quote, the hypothesis underlying much of what we've implemented is that if exposure to, e.g., misinformation directly causes harm, we should use remediations that reduce exposure. And limiting the spread and virality of content is a good way to do that. All gobbledygook justification to say, if we decide that something causes quote unquote harm and we decide what harm means and we decide if it's causing harm, then we're going to use these measures to shadow ban and suppress and censor information. And doctors and scientists.
and doctors and scientists. Just wanted to repeat that again because there were qualified, certified, concerned people speaking up and being censored. And
Yes.
this was the same time I was being censored in my workplace for exerting my professional judgment because I, was a social emotional learning specialist and I noticed that the ideology was negatively impairing our social emotional well-being. So professionals speaking up about COVID, speaking up about gender affirming care were being censored and silenced. And it was, once again, it was all the people that were fighting for liberty and the individual.
Yes. And while they were doing it, and this is especially true during the last 2 years of all the COVID policy, is while they were doing it, if you're someone who self-identifies as being on the left and this is like new to you, they censored so many doctors and scientists who didn't agree with the policies of the past couple years and who even if they didn't agree just had questions or said, hey, we should look into it, there should be multiple studies, or this could potentially have harm on kids, which it did. They censored these doctors and scientists and experts, and then they said to you guys who were only listening to them, to the official narrative, they said all the experts agree. All the scientists agree. You can't disagree with the science. Fauci famously said he's the science. You can't disagree with
Yes.
science. That's
Yes.
crazy talk.
And worth noting, the people that were silenced then, they're the ones that time has proven they were right.
Yes. Yes. They censored, if you're not aware, at the very beginning, they censored anyone, any scientist, any doctor who was saying, hey, the origin of this virus is kind of important, and what about the possibility that it came from a lab, that it's a leak, or whether intentional or not. And they censored people who were saying that, and you couldn't talk about that on YouTube. And I think today you can, because they finally, 2 years since, they've finally come out now and said, yeah, very likely that it probably did come from a lab, but how could we have known that? Like, they're okay with saying that now. How could we have known? Yeah, how could we have known? Because you censored everybody who even asked the question, and you called it misinformation, and you called it conspiracy theory, and you demonized people. You demonized scientists.
Yeah. It's pretty hard not to know that it came from
Yes.
the lab that
No.
develops the
I know.
coronavirus.
I know. We should do a whole episode covering that because it's so crazy the amount of information and evidence they wanted us not to look at and they tried to suppress in favor of this crazy gobbledygook theory about like, well, wet market, it
Yeah,
it's so stupid. So stupid. And that whole Lancet letter, you should come back. We'll do a whole thing on that and see if we get
that sounds lovely.
banned. Yeah, they censored Dr. Robert Malone, creator of the mRNA tech. They censored him.
Yes,
Then they try to say, "Oh, he really wasn't." I've had people who identify as leftists say to me like, because they've heard this and they just repeat it without having looked into it. They're like, "Oh, but he wasn't really the creator of the mRNA vaccine." Yes, he was. Like, go do your research, guys.
he was.
Demonized lefty Joe Rogan. Yeah, they demonized him. Oh man. Okay. We're continuing. We're almost done. We're almost at the end of part 2. So, this is Bari Weiss, Twitter Files part 2 that we've been reading. We're on to tweet number 26 of the part 2 Twitter Files. She says, he added, "We've got Jack on board with implementing this for civic integrity in the near term, but we're going to need to make a more robust case to get this into our repertoire of policy remediations, especially for other policy domains." These are just nefarious, shadowy figures deciding how to further censor and suppress and be tyrannical.
Civic integrity.
Yeah.
Now, by my understanding, part of civic integrity in this country has been freedom of speech
Mm-hmm.
and sharing ideas and caring for each other. That's what civic integrity is. So they are defining what civic integrity is.
Yeah, they're
I don't know
defining
if
it.
they're intentional communists, but that is the culture, that is the behaviors that they are acting upon.
Yes. I don't
Tyranny
know.
takes over. Tyranny takes over. It feeds on that I'm God and I have all the power. I know more than you. That's
Mhm.
how our civic integrity has been corrupted.
Yes. I like you, I'm not sure how many of them know and are self-aware that like, hey, we're the baddies. You know that meme? Are we the baddies? I don't know if they know. Some of them do for
Yeah.
sure. Some of them
Yeah.
know and don't care. But a lot of the ones who like if you read Ordinary Men, which is a book about a reserve police battalion that ended up being used to commit a lot of the murders, many murders during the Holocaust. And it was a study of the guys in this battalion. These were ordinary men, hence the title, who had other jobs. They were in a reserve police force. They were dentists and uh, carpenters, and they had all kinds of jobs. They ended up committing all of these murders, these atrocities, and it was a study of how you get ordinary men to do this. And I think based on that book, I think most people and what I've seen unfold in the past 2 years is I think, yes, there are some leaders and architects of the evil ideology who are aware of what it is and what they're doing. But I think that a lot of people just follow along and they're deluded, and it's the social pressure and it's the idea of being on the right side of history. They've convinced themselves that the ends justify the means, and the tribalism has so infected their brain that they're too afraid to stand against something that's evil and wrong, because then, oh my gosh, that would make me on the right, or like some crazy thought like that, or my friends would think I'm on the right, or my friends would think I'm a race, or my friends would think this or whatever, and that keeps them in this bubble where it's like they can be manipulated, they can be used to go along with evil because they're so afraid of that social stigma.
Yes, and that's a tactic that's been heavily used since at least 2017.
Mhm.
I know a lot of really good people that are quiet, that are not speaking up, that are just going along with what's happening because it's easier. But
Yes.
it's the future of humanity that's going to pay the harshest consequence for not speaking up now. And if everybody did it,
Yes.
if everybody said, this isn't right, let's come together, let's put down this right versus left swords and boxing gloves, and we have to defeat the tyranny that's staring us straight in the eyes right now. Maybe things will be different.
Yeah. This is why I love what you're trying to do with Empowered Pathways and Free Black Thought and is it Reformation Radio?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, cool. Okay, we're going to talk more about that. But we're at the end. This last thing I just wanted to read from Bari Weiss of the Twitter files. Oh, wait, no. Yeah, we are at the end. There's just a few more. She says, there's more to come on this story, which was reported by Abigail Schreier, Schellenberger, MD, Nellie Bowles, Isaac Grafstein, and the team at Free Press. She says, you can follow along here. The authors have broad and expanding access to Twitter's files. The only condition we agreed to was that the material would first be published on Twitter. We're just getting started on our reporting. Documents cannot tell the whole story here. A big thank you to everyone who's spoken to us so far. If you're a current or former Twitter employee, we'd love to hear from you. Write to tips@thefp.com and watch Matt Taibbi for the next installment. And so, what's amazing with these Twitter files is the people who consider themselves leftists or what have you, part of the narrative on Twitter, the celebrities, people like John Cusack, who is one of the saddest, craziest celebrities I think on Twitter, they are furious, but not for the right reasons. They're not furious that Twitter, that this huge corporation was censoring people and was suppressing information and suppressing news stories and limiting what the public got to hear, behaving like the evil big brother in 1984. They're not upset about that. They're upset that this is being exposed.
Really?
Yes. That's what they're upset about. That's how locked in they are to the delusion, to the ideology, to the whole left-right thing, the tribalism, whatever it is. It's amazing to me that that's
Wow.
what you're upset about.
And so the thing about celebrities is they have all the material comfort in the world right now. So
Yeah. They're
they
doing fine.
they're doing fine, and
Yeah.
not only are they doing but they're also kicking the can of tyranny down the road.
Yes, and they're huge mouthpieces for the establishment while saying, much like that Darvo thing, that reversal thing, while saying they're speaking out for the resistance. It's like, guys.
Yeah, if you're saying the things that the state is saying, that every media is saying, that every celebrity is saying and endorsing, you are not the resistance unless you're resisting liberty and sovereignty. If that's what you're pushing back
Yeah,
against, you're doing a very fantastic job of it.
that is what they're resisting. Yeah, they're just, I don't know, like we said, I don't know how many of them are aware of it and how many are not, but um what do you think? Should we cover part 3 or is that good for today?
I'm down for whatever you feel like.
Let's see. Hold on. Let's see.
Is part 3 where they were working with government agencies revealed?
Yes. Yeah, and that was Matt Taibbi, I believe. Let me pull that one up. Let's do it.
Yeah, because
We can.
that's a little more sinister. That's when we start getting a little sinister, because we have government agencies and officials censoring other political candidates.
Yes. That's what a lot of people will claim. Like, well, it's not, they try and justify something unethical and immoral and just flat out wrong by saying, but hey, it's a corporation that's doing it. So it's not the government. No, wrong. First of all, it's wrong either way. It doesn't matter if it's legal. It's wrong. I mean, there's a difference between what's unethical and what's illegal, what's immoral and what's illegal. And I care about principles. I care about, like, if this is wrong, it's wrong. I'm a free speech absolutist. I'm not like, oh, free speech, except for when a huge corporation decides to censor. That's cool because it's legal. Like, that's not cool. It's evil.
Right. It is evil.
It's evil. And but if that is your stance, oh, it's okay if it's a corporation doing it. It's not the government. Well, this is about to blow that out of the water because the government was involved. So,
And what do you call it when the government and corporations merge? What did Mussolini call that?
did it start with an F?
Yes.
Do you want to tell people what it is?
Fascism.
Yeah, that's an
That's it.
Words mean things. Yeah, John Cusack, speaking of that, Looney Tunes, which is sad. I think it's really sad. His mind is gone. But he was using that word fascism incorrectly recently and got into he called drunk 3PO a fascist and then, like, blocked him or something. And it's like you don't
I'm
even
picturing him with the boombox.
Yeah. It's too bad to learn this about some of your favorite actors who've been in nostalgic movies from your childhood. Okay, sorry, this is taking me a second to pull up part 3 because there's so many tweets, and you guys are right. Part 5 just came out. We're not going to go all the way through that. We're just going to do part 3 now. Can you do some transitional? Can you hum some music?
Can beatbox. No.
Here we go. Okay. Can you guys see that?
I can't if I'm supposed to.
Oh, wait. There we go. Okay. Matt Taibbi. Thread, the Twitter files, the removal of Donald Trump, part 1, October 2020 through January 6th. The world knows much of the story of what happened between riots at the Capitol on January 6th and the removal of President Donald Trump from Twitter on January 8th. We'll show you what hasn't been revealed: the erosion of standards within the company in the months before January 6th, decisions by high-ranking executives to violate their own policies, and more, against the backdrop of ongoing documented interaction with federal agencies. This should bother everyone. Again, it doesn't matter if you consider yourself on the left or on the right. It doesn't matter. Interaction with federal agencies, telling this corporation who to remove, what high-profile people to ban. This first installment covers the period before the election through January 6th. Tomorrow, Schellenberger, MD, will detail the chaos inside Twitter on January 7th, and on Sunday, Bari Weiss will reveal the secret internal communications from the key date of January 8th. Whatever your opinion on the decision to remove Trump that day, the internal communications at Twitter between January 6th and January 8th have a clear historical importance. Even Twitter's employees understood in the moment that it was a landmark moment in the annals of speech. They've covered up the person at Twitter who said this, but it's a screenshot of a Twitter employee saying, "Is this the first sitting head of state to ever be suspended?" Like, they knew how important, they knew how historical this was. I'm continuing. If you're just listening along, we're reading the Twitter files part 3, and this is from Matt Taibbi. He says, as soon as they finished banning Trump, Twitter executives started processing new power. They prepared to ban future presidents and White Houses, perhaps even Joe Biden. The, quote, new administration, end quote, says one executive, quote, will not be suspended by Twitter unless absolutely necessary, end quote. How do Joe Biden people feel about that?
I don't know any.
I know some. I'd like to ask them. First of all, they probably don't know anything about this. So, but if I told them, and they believed me, because you also have to get over that belief hurdle where they're like, oh, that doesn't sound right. If they actually went and read it and realized this is true,
So
I don't know.
the thing about that I think people really would be beneficial to understand is that cognitive dissonance is a feature, not a bug. Like, we are wired for that.
Mhm.
So it's important. That's an important thing for us to bust through and rectify, and not just continue to ignore.
Can you explain what you mean by that? Like cognitive dissonance? Because some people
Yes,
don't know
like
what that means.
when we're presented with something that could change our mind, especially, well, it's information that if we did process it correctly, it would change our mind. So we are wired to resist things. We're wired to resist changing our mind.
Mhm.
And when we're presented with information that conflicts with what we already believe, we're wired to naturally reject that,
To disregard it. Yeah.
to disregard that. So I think that resting in that awareness that I'm wired to resist this, but the evidence, it is clear that it's okay to accept something new. And it's actually really, really good to accept something new and to admit, oh, I was wrong, or I was led astray. It's nobody's fault, because we're also taught to trust authority. We're taught to trust our politicians, trust our teachers, trust the news sources. But those are other things that we need to get rid of right now as well.
Yes. Thomas, thank you. Thomas is a channel member. I think that's what that means next to your name. Thank you. Thomas has a great definition. Here we go. Cognitive dissonance is holding conflicting opinions without being critical of either. Thank you, Thomas. And thank you, Jason. Okay. So I'm going to get back to this. This is Matt Taibbi, Twitter Files 3. We're going to try. I have about 15 more minutes, then I have to get ready. I'm supposed to be in a podcast today with the minds.com. I think they have a
Okay.
show. So I think we can get through part 3. Okay. As soon as they finished banning Trump, Twitter executives started processing new power. They prepared to ban future presidents and White Houses, perhaps even Joe Biden. They said, quote, the new administration will not be suspended by Twitter unless absolutely necessary. And here you can see that in their communication. Quote, however, these accounts will be transitioned over to the new administration in due course and will not be suspended by Twitter unless absolutely necessary to alleviate real world harm. Again, these administrators at this huge corporation are deciding what harm means, which is hilarious. Twitter executives removed Trump in part over what one executive called the context surrounding actions by Trump and supporters, quote, over the course of the election and frankly the last 4+ years, end quote. In the end, they looked at a broad picture, but that approach can cut both ways. And so they include some communication here with Vijaya. Hi, Vijaya. I'm working with blank on my team to put together a document to share with you with a point of view from research, ours, academics with whom we have been working, etc., on Donald J. Trump's language as coded incitement to further violence. So they're deciding, again, they're redefining words, just like Orwell, Orwell's 1984. They're using the opposite words that, they're naming things the very opposite of what they are. And then they're deciding what harm means. And they're deciding, well, there's nothing in this tweet that is incitement. So we're going to say it's coded incitement. It's like hidden secret incitement. It's secret. We can hear it. It's a dog whistle. It's coded. Right?
Only we can.
Only we can oh, yes, it's a coded language. In the meantime, here's our quick take. The decision on whether to pull that particular tweet or use that as a last straw for Trump depends on many factors, including, number one, the overall context and narrative in which that tweet lives. We currently analyze tweets and consider them at a tweet-by-tweet basis, which does not appropriately take into account the context surrounding. You can use the yelling fire into a crowded theater example. Context matters, and the narrative that Trump and his friends have pursued over the course of this election and frankly the last 4+ years must be taken into account when interpreting and analyzing that tweet. Number two, the larger question is around our moral imperative. That's opposite language right there. Our moral imperative and decision as a company, which user sentiment should not drive based on number one. And I believe that this tweet does violate our rules when taking that historical context and current climate into account. It's a lot of words for he didn't tweet anything that violated policy, but we're going to decide anyway that it's secret coded language that violates and that it causes harm.
The nanny state for real.
For real, the nanny state. The bulk of the internal debate leading to Trump's ban took place in those 3 January days. However, the intellectual framework was laid in the months preceding the Capitol riots. Before January 6, Twitter was a unique mix of automated, rules-based enforcement and more subjective moderation by senior executives. As Bari Weiss reported, the firm had a vast array of tools for manipulating visibility, aka shadow banning, most all of which were thrown at Trump and others pre-January 6. As the election approached, senior executives, perhaps under pressure from federal agencies with whom they met more as time progressed, increasingly struggled with rules and began to speak of VOS as pretext to do what they'd like to have done anyway. After January 6, internal Slacks show that Twitter executives getting a kick out of intensified relationships with federal agencies. Here's trust and safety head Yoel Roth lamenting a lack of, quote, generic enough calendar descriptions to conceal his, quote, very interesting meeting partners. Look at these guys. They're laughing about and like getting, like, as Matt Taibbi said here, getting their jollies like off on the fact that they're meeting with the FBI. Probably felt like they're in some movie, like, oh, we're the stars of this. We have to meet with the FBI about banning the president.
I'm sure they did get they drank from the cup of power and loved it.
And loved it. Drunk on power. Totally drunk on power. Here he goes. This is their internal communications. Yoel Roth says, it happens. I'm a big believer in calendar transparency, but I reached a certain point where my meetings became ... very interesting ... to people, and there weren't meeting names generic enough to cover. Anyway, underlined, let me know. And then whoever he's writing to at Twitter says, very boring business meeting that is definitely not about Trump, winky face. And then Yoel says, pretty much. And then Yoel says, quote, all caps, definitely not meeting with the FBI, I swear, all caps. Like, they love this. Then they're like, LMAO, laughing my ass off. You're so drunk on that power of like, we're meeting with the FBI about banning Trump.
Has there been any consequences to that Yoel fella?
Not that I know of. You guys in the chat, can you tell us? Because I'm not sure. I love this, Dion. Wink, wink, nod, nod, nudge, nudge. Okay. These initial reports are based on searches for docs linked to prominent executives whose names are already public. They include Roth, former Trust and Policy Chief Vijaya Gadde, and recent plank walked Deputy General Counsel and former top FBI lawyer Jim Baker. There's all this back and forth, by the way. That's what somebody, where is it? I saw a chat go by from Tweegirl. She says it's a revolving door. People leave the government to go work at Twitter, and people leave Twitter to go back and work in the government. For everything else, they recruit activists to tame them. Yeah.
And that's also news media outlets as well.
Yes.
The CIA and CNN, they flip people.
Yeah. Back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And the campaigns, like the Hillary Clinton campaign and Google, like revolving door between these campaigns, these political operatives, activists, administrators, and social media, like government people. It's constant. Okay.
Fascism.
Yeah, fascism. One particular Slack channel offers a unique window into the evolving thinking of top officials in late 2020 and early 2021. On October 8th of 2020, executives opened a channel called US 2020 XFN enforcement. Through January 6th, this would be home for discussions about election-related removals. That's removals from Twitter, if you guys are just joining us, especially ones that involved, quote, high-profile accounts, often called VITs, or very important tweeters. And then he has a screenshot here. This is Matt Taibbi. We're reading the Twitter files part 3, if you're just joining. He has a screenshot here of this from this Slack, the secret Slack channel. And, where they're just saying, starting October 9th, tomorrow, until November 15th, this channel will be used for the following reasons related to the U.S. 2020 elections. And then it goes on with all the stuff. It's an enforcement channel. This is going to speed up our response related to election issues, meaning who we need to censor, who we need to ban.
And once again, were they censoring the side of sovereignty or globalism?
Individual sovereignty, open information, freedom of speech. That's who they're censoring.
There we go.
There was at least some tension between safety operations, a larger department whose staffers used a more rules-based process for addressing issues like porn, scams, and threats, and a smaller, more powerful cadre of senior policy execs like Roth and Gaddy. The latter group were a high-speed Supreme Court of moderation, issuing content rulings on the fly, often in minutes and based on guesses, but calls, even Google searches, even in cases involving gut calls, even Google searches, even in cases involving the president. And so then you can see this. It's a tweet from Donald Trump that says, breaking news, 50,000 Ohio voters getting wrong absentee ballots, out of control, a rigged election. And then you can see here in this Slack channel, these Roth and some other Twitter employees, and they're having a conversation about whether or not to ban this tweet or ban him. They're like, a rigged election, would that be enough? Would that be in violation be enough to be in violation, right? And Roth says, if the claim of fact were inaccurate, yes. And then he did a Google search and he found an NPR article that says 50,000 Ohio voters to receive new absentee ballots after error found. He goes, oh, but it looks like it's true.
There's that cognitive dissonance right there.
Yeah, man. Too bad NPR. This is factual because we'd like to ban him for this.
Yeah.
Okay, continuing. We're going to speed through to the end of part 3 of the Twitter files. This is Matt Taibbi. During this time, executives were also clearly liaisons. I can never say this word. They were doing liaisons with federal enforcement and intelligence agencies about moderation of election-related content. While we're still at the start of reviewing the Twitter files, we're finding out more about these interactions every day. Okay, so they had liaisons with federal enforcement intelligence agencies about moderating election content.
Yeah, not about human trafficking or any of that stuff.
No, not about CP. They don't really care that much about it, we found, in my opinion. Not as much as they should. Policy Director Nick Pickles. What a great
Fake name.
Nick Pickles is asked if they should say that Twitter detects, quote, misinfo through ML human review and partnerships with outside experts. The employee asked, I know that's been a slippery process. Not sure if you want our public explanation to hang on that. So here it is. Nick Pickles, are you comfortable with marketing talking about misinformation by saying that we detect it through ML, human review, and partnerships with outside experts? And they have this starred, partnerships with outside experts, probably because that means the federal agencies. And then he answers. He goes, can we just say partnerships? E.g., not sure that we describe the FBI and Department of Homeland Security as experts or some NGOs that aren't academic. Okay, so that tells you right there who they're talking about, who they're consulting with. Pickles quickly asked if they could, quote, just say partnerships. After a pause, he says, e.g., not sure we'd describe the FBI and DHS as experts. This post about the Hunter Biden laptop situation shows that Roth not only met weekly with the FBI and DHS, but with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, DNI. Okay. Here we go. Here's another screenshot. Yoler has checked in. Here's what they say. Quote, "What's new for you since our last check-in? Hacked materials exploded. We blocked the New York Post story." They're talking about the Hunter Biden laptop story that they censored, guys, that Twitter censored right before an election. "We blocked the New York Post story. Then we unblocked it, but said the opposite." Me, they lied. We unblocked it, but said the opposite. Then we said that we unblocked it. And now we're in a messy situation where our policy is in shambles. Comms is angry. Reporters think we're idiots, and we're refactoring an exceedingly complex policy 18 days out from the election. In short, FML. Weekly sync with the FBI, DHS, and DNI, Department of National Intelligence. Is that right? Director of National Intelligence, RE Election Security. The meeting happened about 15 minutes after the aforementioned hacked materials implosion. The government declined to share anything useful when asked. Monthly meeting with the FBI, FIFT, briefed on several ongoing investigations. I mean, it's just in bed with these agencies. Roth's report to FBI, DHS, DNI is almost farcical in its self-flagellating tone. Some of Roth's later slacks indicate his weekly confabs with federal law enforcement involved separate meetings. Here he ghosts the FBI and DHS respectively to go first to an Aspen Institute thing and then take a call with Apple. That's kind of funny.
Wow.
He's like, I'm going to go do this other thing first. Here the FBI sends reports about a pair of tweets, the second of which involves a former Tippecanoe County, Indiana counselor and Republican named John Basham, claiming that, quote, between 2% and 25% of ballots by mail are being rejected for errors. And you can see this on their internal thing here at Twitter. They said, "We just got a report from the FBI concerning 2 tweets. This one is related to the, quote, shredding of mail-in ballots. This is proven to be false via this." And then they cite PolitiFact, which is a propaganda outlet. Do we have a moment ready for this one? And then they go, "Number 2, I believe this was deemed novio on numerous occasions." So the FBI is coming to them basically and saying, get rid of this tweet. You know, that's kind of what they look into this one.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah. The FBI's second report concerned this tweet by John Basham. And this is where he's talking about between 2% to 25% of ballots by mail are being rejected for errors. The FBI flagged the tweet, then got circulated in the enforcement Slack. Twitter cited PolitiFact to say that the first story was proven to be false, then noted that the second was already deemed novio on numerous occasions. The group then decides to apply a, quote, "learn how voting is safe and secure" label, because one commenter says it's totally normal to have a 2% error rate. Roth then gives the final go-ahead to process initiated by the FBI. I think we can use the mail-in voting label for this one as is. Examining the entire election enforcement Slack, we didn't see one reference to moderation requests from the Trump campaign, the Trump White House, or Republicans generally. We looked. They may exist, but we were told that they do. However, they were absent here. So everything they're looking at is requests from, at least in this Twitter dump, Twitter files number 3, from federal agencies looking to see how much they could censor from Trump or Trump's people.
Yeah. And that's a problem. That's, what do you call it whenever the government and a private company are interfering with an election?
Is it also start with an F?
I think it's fascism.
Yes.
And so now it's pretty obvious that we all live in a banana republic.
Yeah. Thanks for walking through that with me. I know some people have already read it and they're like, I'm not going to tune in for this, but I'm hoping there are people, some people I've just newly discovered who would say that they're on the left who watch Deprogrammed, and I'm hoping they'll watch this episode and tell me what you think about it in the comments. Tell me if you disagree with us, but I hope you watch. I hope you get past any cognitive dissonance of holding conflicting opinions. And if you think this is wrong, like, let us know, because at the end of the day, I think Jason's right. Like, we're on the same side. We
Yeah.
should be. We should be on the same side. This is wrong. KW True, what's up? Thanks for hanging out in the chat. Good to see you, Chris. We just covered the Twitter files if you're just joining us. Part 2 and 3. Okay. That was a lot of talking on my half. I apologize.
No,
A lot of reading.
it was good. I'm glad you went through it. I did not take the time to go through all of those when they first came out because I was under the impression that, oh, they just released everything that I was already kind of aware of.
Right.
But I'm glad that we combed through it and went through it and laid it out for what it is. It is an assault on liberty. It is tyrannical people within a private company and then tyrannical people within our own government colluding against liberty, colluding against national sovereignty, because that was, take you Trump for whatever. I don't want to get into him because I'm not sure how I feel about him, but I do know that on those sides of a globalized society or a sovereign society, he was at least vocally and face fronting a proponent of liberty.
Yeah.
And that was the side that was really clamped down and that is made to look like awful people.
Yes. I feel at the end of the day, that's why the whole machine was so against him, because he was that sort of populist and on the side of sovereignty and instead of globalism. And I think it was, and I think also to some extent, maybe they couldn't control him as well as they could previous presidents, or as well as they want to be able to control presidents. I'm talking about the administrative state here. You can call it deep state, whatever you want to call it.
He
But I
was the
think,
first one to
yeah,
emerge that wasn't associated with that, at
yes,
least coming up through the system. Like I said, I don't know what deals he's made privately or whatever, but I know how he was attacked, and I know that I think the first impeachment came just a few days after he gave this pretty amazing speech at the UN.
hmm,
Trump's 2019 UN speech, because that's when I started to go down the rabbit hole. It's like, okay, what is it with this guy?
yeah,
What's the deal with this guy? So I listened to that speech and I was like, holy cow.
yeah,
This is not who I see on TV. This is not what the media makes him out to be.
the caricature.
Yeah, and while we're on the subject of presidential speeches, something else for the audience to look at is Biden's 2017 speech. When his last speech as vice president, he gave it at the World Economic Forum. So that's a very interesting thing for people to consider as well, the content of that speech and the way that he was so lovingly introduced.
I need to watch that. I haven't seen that. Thank you for recommending that. 2017, his last speech as vice president at the WF. I will check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us today. We're focused today. We just did Twitter files part 2 and 3. This has been, my co-host today has been Jason Littlefield. Can you just remind people, we're going to put it up on screen, but remind people where they can find you if they want to find more of your work?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at Jason the THEE human. There we go. Empoweredpathways.org, freeblackthought.com, and then Reformation Radio, wherever you find podcast. And if I would really appreciate it if you did check out that podcast and start with the most recent episodes, work your way back. That's what I recommend.
Cool. And I'll let you guys know, I'm going to be on Reformation Radio with Jason soon. I'll let you guys know when. But thanks for hanging out with us today.
For sure.
Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for supporting the show. If you are a YouTube member here on the channel member, or if you are a subscriber on Subscribestar or Patreon or Locals, thank you so much for the support. Thanks for sharing the videos. And if you haven't seen it yet and you want to have a pleasant evening wrapping Christmas presents. Go put on the first half of our house concert from Friday night and enjoy some opera music and my husband on piano. And I hope you have a great week. I'm about to be on, I should announce, I'm about to be on minds.com. They have a podcast that I'm going to be on next. And then tonight at 7:00 Central, I'm going to be on Toxic Femme with Nina Infinity. If you guys watch that show, tune in. And then I think on Friday, I'm going to be on Friday Night Tights, which is awesome. So, but I'll see you guys between now and then. Just forgot to make those announcements. So thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon and week.
You too. I'm going to talk to you in a minute. Okay.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you to today's sponsor, the Church on the Square of Georgetown, Texas, which happens to be my church. My church is no longer allowed to advertise on Facebook, which is unfortunate because that's how I and a lot of other church members originally found them. They've been told that they violate community standards. There's no details there of what that means, but you guys know the score. Anyway, since they're not allowed to advertise, I'm here to give them a plug. You can find them online at thechurchonthesquare.org. You can also find videos of all the sermons and some other kinds of content on their YouTube page at Church on the Square. You can also join us. If you happen to be in the Georgetown, Texas area, we meet every Sunday at Ken's Guitars, that's Kenz, Ken's Guitars, right on the Georgetown Square. We meet outside, right on the square. Sometimes, if the weather's nice, you might find us there. You might find us outside in front of Ken's. But if you're local, I hope to see you.